Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Clinker Winker, and today we're here in the cockpit of the F-15C in War Thunder, and I'm going to be showing you guys exactly how I set up my radar and some of my best practices to use when flying in simulator battles. So, um, first thing is first, we need to go into our options. All right, I'm going to go to Air Battle Settings, and there are two settings, well, three, I guess. Two settings that I change from the default. The first is target cyclic switching of aircraft radar. You want that to say no. All right. And the reason for this is we're going to be using a different control scheme. We're going to be using a cursor to move around our radar screen in order to manually select targets. Then we're going to be using constant radar elevation. Right here, we're going to turn that off. And what that's going to allow you to do is it basically like uncages the elevation of your radar. So normally in simulator battles, when you're flying, your radar, the center of its vertical scan is right where your nose is pointing. Sorry, I just hit my mic. It's right where your nose is pointing. So, but this, if we turn this setting off, it's going to allow us to manually move it, which is extremely important if you're flying at altitude and you want to look down. And it's also important if you're flying low and want to look up, which both of these are more common now that we have reduced multipathing. People are flying at higher altitudes, and I recommend you do the same. So, and then I always turn these two settings off here. I don't. I think the radar screen is adequate enough, and I just like to keep these off for immersion. But then we're going to go into controls, and this is where things can get a little bit complicated. If you're using controller, I'm just going to say right now, this is going to be too much. It's going to be too much for most of you. If you're using mouse and keyboard, perfectly fine. If you're using a HOTAS, you definitely want to have a modifier key. I'm using a HOTAS, so my controls are going to look a little bit different to most people. Every HOTAS has different names for their bindings. But let's just jump right into this. So, if I can find it. This right here, these settings right here, horizontal and vertical target Q control axis. You're going to bind these, all right? And when you bind the horizontal, if you can't auto detect the axis on like your joystick, or if you're using your keyboard, right is going to be your maximum value, left is going to be your minimum value on the horizontal one, and then up and down, that's intuitive. But that's going to allow you to move the cursor around your radar screen, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. All right, then obviously you're going to want to have your lock button and your BVR button, or your not BVR button, your ACM mode. That's the mode where you just turn it to ACM mode and it locks the first target it sees. That's very useful for dogfighting, but I really strongly recommend against it using it before you've properly ID'd a target. You will kill friendlies doing that. Now, change radar IRST mode, obviously, but then there's something that people don't really use a lot. I mean, people very, very rarely use it, which is the search mode. Okay, so the search mode, it's not an actual like mode on your radar. It's changing how much up and down and left and right your radar is scanning at one time. So, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. And then there is, if I can find it, your radar elevation. Ah, there it is right there. Tilt control axis. All right. So your tilt control axis is going to be what's going to point your radar up and down. All right. And I'll show you how to tell where it's pointed in a minute, but you need to make sure you have constant radar elevation turned off in the options for this to work. This is where we start getting into modifier keys. I personally, since I'm using a HOTAS, I'm using a modifier key for that and also to change my radar modes. So my change radar mode button, I'm going to be pressing my modifier key, which is just any key that you can push that's designed to be used for like switching what your other buttons do. So I'm going to push my modifier key, which is the enable axis, and then reset axis value is going to be you can put that as whatever you want. Honestly, I have it on my hat, on my HOTAS stick, and then your minimum value is going to be up with the same button that you're using to move your cursor forward on the radar screen. All right, so you're going to push your modifier key, then move it up, and down, same thing. So I think that's everything as far as like bindings go. Let me show you how it actually works in practice. Okay, so here we are. This is what your radar screen is going to look like when you've just taken off. Okay, we're not falling. This is what your radar screen is going to look like when you've just taken off. All right, your cursor is in the center and you can move it. All right, now those two numbers that are next to your cursor, what they are supposed to be is telling you the minimum and maximum altitude scanned by your radar at that distance. All right, so if I'm looking about like 12 miles ahead of me, and 12 miles ahead of me I can see 25 miles into the air where my cursor is, right? And 1 mile off the ground. So then if I push my modifier key and move this up, that changes. But I will say I do not think this is working properly, these numbers. I don't think they're working properly with manual radar elevation. All right, because they change. If you can see, they change when my radar points down. What's happening is the radar, it's just a bug. The radar is sorry, I hit my mic. The radar is perceiving this tilt. If you look on the right hand screen, right where my cursor is, that little box there is where your radar is elevated to. All right, so right now it's in the center. All right, when I move this up, it thinks my radar is pointing down and it assumes that my aircraft is level. So it's telling me I can only see 15 miles up because it thinks my radar is pointed downwards, but really it's pointed perfectly level. All right, so don't use those numbers if you're using manual radar elevation. Now, we're going to switch our mode to TWS here, and with the F-15 specifically, it's difficult to tell what mode you're in, but all of the other modes start in 60 by 10 mode. All right, and you can see that right there. And then if I hit the button once, it goes to TWS. Now I'm in 30 by 10 mode. I'm going to move my mic here. 30 by 10 mode, that's TWS. All right, so that means that my radar is it's scanning a 30-degree slice of the airspace in front of me, and it is looking 5 degrees up and 5 degrees down, right? And then I can move this, and it's scanning 10 degrees. This is the mode that I normally keep the radar in. There is another mode where if you use the switch radar search mode key, it will do this. Now we're in 60 by 5 mode. Now 60 by 5 mode, in my opinion, it's a little bit thin, but yeah, it's just a little bit thin. Then you can see that we're at 22,000 feet right now, and if we have our radar elevated like perfectly level, we can see up to past our altitude, but we can only see 17,000 feet above the ground. So it's really thin. It's a really thin slice of the air. So when enemies get closer to you, you're gonna have a lot of blind spots, which is why I tend to use the 30 by 10 and just move it manually. When you move this cursor manually, it moves your entire radar scope. And so like if I move it like 5 degrees this way, the area that I'm searching shifts 5 degrees to the left, right? So there's that. And then I also have something, and I forgot to mention this, but your scope scale. Change radar scope scale is very important, because you don't want to be looking just 23, whoopsie. You don't want to be just looking 23 miles in front of you. Realistically, you should be able to see really, really far with this radar, and with a lot of modern radars. I like to kick it out to 92, and then switch back to 46 when I know enemies are getting closer. Just to be able to have greater situational awareness, and also these missiles have a longer range than 23 miles, so you definitely need to have that key bound. So now let's see if we can find something on the radar.
Sam, 12 o'clock, AOA.
Alright, so I can see these two Yahoos visually. Now if I point my radar up, no shot I'm seeing them. There's no shot that I'm gonna see them right now, because my radar is pointed above my nose and my nose is above them. But if I move it down, I can see both of them at once. Alright, and I can just hover my cursor in TWS over them, and that's the TWS soft lock. It's as easy as that. All I have to do is put my cursor over them, and then my cursor starts following them, and from there I can launch a missile. And then get out of here. Shoot and scoot, because they're Pitbull. But yeah, so guys, that's the way that I set my radar up. In my opinion, this is peak performance, right? If you get good at managing your radar, it's definitely a skill to manage your radar. And if you get good at it, you just need to be able to keep track of where you're pointed in elevation. You might be looking at an enemy in front of you and thinking, why am I not seeing him on my radar? I can't lock him. It's because your radar is probably pointed all the way up here, like you see right there. That's where the thing is. It's probably pointed all the way up there or all the way down low, because that's what you were doing before. Or sometimes I just keep holding my modifier key, and then when I try to move my radar around, like trying to move it, and then you see that I'm pushing my modifier key, and now my modes are all changing and shit. So that's what I do. And then another thing that you guys should consider is that the F-15 has an even better mode, which is, well, I shouldn't say better, it's more niche, and it makes your radar seem more powerful. But what I like to do is, when an enemy is really far away, I can scan basically the entirety of the sky, like vertically. I can scan like all the possible altitudes he's at, if I know which direction he's coming from, roughly, because you have a very good RWR with this thing. So you see a threat on it, and then you're like, okay, I point my nose at him, and you know you're facing directly at him, but you're not seeing him. What you can do is bump it into the 15 by 15 mode. Now your radar is looking at literally like the whole sky in that 15 degree slice. Alright, so you're gonna find his ass. You are going to see his ass, and you're gonna find him quickly too, as long as he's within range. And then I would just kick it out to 92 miles, and then that's it. I'll find him at like 50 miles, and then shoot a missile at them and usually get the shot off first, unless it's an F-16. Their radar is better for some odd reason. But yeah, that's basically how I do things, how I manage my radar in simulator mode. So guys, let me know what you think. If you have any ideas on how to make this better, or if you do something a little bit differently, that's okay. Tell me about it. Tell me about it in the comments, because I want to know how other people do things, because I don't know, I think that's super interesting, and it's definitely something that a lot of people do very differently, and a lot of the ways that people do it are still completely valid. So yeah, just like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.